My question is to the Prime Minister. Does he stand by all of his government's statements and actions?
Yes, and in particular I stand by this government's recent actions to begin restoring law and order and cracking down on crime by removing taxpayer funding for Section 27 reports to further discount sentences and by chucking out Labor's prison reduction targets. So New Zealand has voted for a government that's going to restore law and order, deal with victims over criminals, and that's what we're going to get on and do.
Supplementary. Who's correct when it comes to the proposed government legislation on treaty principles? The Prime Minister, when he said, well, we've never been open-minded, we've always said there's no intention, no commitment, no support for it beyond first reading, or David Seymour, who said, but ultimately the bit I don't believe is he won't change his mind.
Well, we have a coalition agreement that says we're going to support a bill through to first reading, and that's no commitment beyond that.
Is David Seymour correct that he's lost his nerve on the treaty principles bill?
I reject the member's assertion, but what I'd say is that member should be the one that is nervous, because when Kieran McAnulty starts shaving off that beard, he needs to be ready to go. And as I would have said, as we observed over summer, who was the de facto leader of the Labor Party? Michael Wood.
Supplementary question. Is it acceptable for one of his ministers to tell the media that the Prime Minister's lost his nerve and he doesn't believe the Prime Minister's being truthful with the public?
Well, I reject that member's assertion on that question. What I'd say to you is that we are a coalition government. We are a coalition government. We have different views, different perspectives, and we are aligned on the things that matter, which is getting things done, cleaning up after your government's mess, so that's what we're going to get on and do.
Entry question. Was News Hub incorrect when they quoted David Seymour saying, ultimately the bit I don't believe is he won't change his mind and if the public really wants it?
Well, I can tell you David Seymour is doing a great job. He's going to make sure that we get our kids back in school. He's got special delegation for getting kids back into school, which is something that this government and you as Education Minister didn't care about.
A point of order.
I accept my questions are relatively political in nature, but the Prime Minister hasn't addressed any of them.
Well, I think you've answered your own question with or assertion. They're political in nature, but if the Prime Minister would like to make a further comment on that previous question, he's all good. Do you want to?
If any minister other than David Seymour was to claim publicly that the Prime Minister had lost his nerve and wasn't being truthful with the public, would they still be a minister?
I support all of my ministers. They're doing a fantastic job. They're doing a fantastic job. The only member in this whole House who should be nervous is the person answering the questions.
If David Seymour doesn't believe the public should be able to trust the word of the Prime Minister, why should the public?
We have a coalition agreement. It's crystal clear. We're going to support a bill to first reading, and there is no commitment beyond that.
Mr. Speaker. Does he agree then with the Right Honourable Winston Peters about David Seymour? Well, it's disgraceful that somebody is so desperate and this petty, childish schoolboy behaviour just won't do. Point of order.
Point of order.
Point of order, Right Honourable Winston Peters.
Mr. Speaker, this is a matter of chronology, and that questioner did not say when that statement was made, and therefore the Prime Minister could not be responsible for that and get a life and learn how this process works.
Order, Mr. Speaker. Point of order, Mr. Speaker. It's immaterial when Winston Peters said that. I didn't ask him whether he agreed with the Deputy Prime Minister. I asked him whether he agreed with the Right Honourable Winston Peters, who I still believe is Winston Peters even if he has a different job.
Well, you better ask the question again.
Well, happily, Mr. Speaker.
I'll tell you what, try and keep it contemporary, because going back into history is not good for us.
Does he agree with the Right Honourable... Well, it might not be good for the government, Mr. Speaker. Does he agree with the Right Honourable Winston Peters about David Seymour? Well, it's disgraceful that somebody is so desperate. This petty, childish schoolboy behaviour just won't do.
Point of order. Point of order,
Speaker. The Prime Minister is responsible for those obligations and duties that he has undertaken from the day he first took the job on, and not a day earlier. And in this case, this question should be ruled out.
Mr. Speaker, unless the Speaker was to rule out that any statements made by anyone other than a minister were not the Prime Minister's responsibility, we couldn't ask him whether he agreed with anything. Well, and actually, nor could many of the government's patsy questions be allowed by that criteria either.
Just had a ruling that makes it very clear that the Prime Minister is responsible for things that relate to his government or her government, and there is a point that if the statement relates to a time when the Prime Minister, when the current Prime Minister was not Prime Minister, then that might be the case. But I actually think, hold on, hang on. I don't want to have to stand up on it. I think this is a question the Prime Minister is probably capable of answering.
Speaking of the point of order.
Yep.
Mr Speaker, clearly ministers can be asked about whether or not they agree with statements made by other members or indeed any members of the public, but it's useful for the House to know exactly what time period the member is being asked to reflect upon. It may well be that Mr Peters' comment was talking about the childish behaviour of the Labour Party, for example. But we don't know because the Leader of the Opposition hasn't given a time period.
Point of order, Mr Speaker. I'd ask you to reflect on the ruling that you have just indicated and consider that in light of question number 1, which was a government question to the Minister of Finance that was all about a period in which she was not a minister, and yet she was quoting liberally from a document about something that she did not have responsibility for at the time. If you are ruling that the only thing ministers can be asked about is stuff that has happened since the election, then the entirety of question 1 was out of order.
Don't need further on this. But I'll come to you if I need to. Believe me. Firstly, on question 1, that question relates entirely to reports that the Minister has seen. That's perfectly legitimate. And then if you look at all of the subs that came, and I listened to them carefully, and you'll recall that I did cut one of them off, then they were all about the answers given by the Minister, and they related to current figures. So that's that dealt with. I better hear from Mr Bishop. So you're over it, okay? It's
That's how we all
feel. David Seymour, Honourable David Seymour.
Thank you, Mr.
Is this a
Speaker.
point of order or what?
I think I might be able to assist with it, yes.
No, well, I don't want your assistance. You're either taking a new point of order or not.
Look, you're lost, Mr. Speaker.
Yep.
Gee, arrogant.
I've got a very long memory. So could we have the question one more time? And I think it would be useful to put context around that.
Does he agree with the Right Honourable Winston Peters about David Seymour? Well, it's disgraceful that somebody is so desperate. This petty, childish schoolboy behaviour just won't do.
What I'm going to say to you is that this is a coalition government of 3 parties. We have different views from time to time, and that's actually quite okay, it's quite healthy, and it's quite constructive. And unlike that previous government that was all about control and spin and management, I have not heard, and the whole time since he's become Leader of the Opposition, we haven't had one question on the economy, not one on health, not one on education, not one on housing, not one on infrastructure.